We have been just entering into such a season of faith in our church, and not just entering into it, but getting a new revelation and understanding of it. I will tell you that back when I was going to speak the first message on faith, it was one of those things that I love to talk about faith, and Beth loves to talk about faith. So we were going to speak a single message, and here we are 5 weeks later, and we're still talking about it. And it's no doubt that God has hijacked this subject for great purposes and reasons. And today what I'm going to speak on is a perspective of faith that I've never spoken on before, and probably have never really seen it this way. But here we are, and what God is revealing to me, I want to convey it to you because I believe God's going to help some people find freedom today and a new understanding of how to use their faith and what faith can also be. It's everything that we've been telling you for 4 weeks, but I believe this is going to take you right to the spot where you are to help you navigate your faith in such a powerful way. So I want to speak a message today on expressions of faith. And speaking of which, last week, best message. Oh my. Last night, I just, honestly, to try to finish up this message, I just sat there and listened to her whole message again. And it was just stirring inside of me. And I encourage you, listen, if you hear something that resonates with you, you can keep going back to it because it stays up there on Facebook and it stays up there on YouTube, and you can go back and just let that pour into your spirit. And Beth, that was such an unbelievable message, helping to give us a proper perspective of faith. And I tell you, we are just blessed to have a speaker like Beth. I'm already looking forward to her speaking at Adored. I got to tell you, she could travel the world. She really could. As a matter of fact, honey, I would carry your bags and your makeup, and I'd go wherever God takes you. I'd just go with you. But we got a church to pastor. So there's nothing we love more than pastoring our own people. Anytime we go away, can't wait to get back. But faith is something that is really defining itself in our lives and in the Green family. So these are some lessons that we're just conveying to you that we believe is going to lead you into a new place and in your walk of faith and this journey that you're on. So some of you over the past 4 weeks, you've gained some new wisdom of the evidence and the substance it takes to have real faith. Some of you have learned how to motivate your own faith without somebody else motivating it for you. And you've learned how to stir that inside of you. And so many were prayed for here a few weeks ago. Well, not so many. Several hundred people stood in lines as we prayed over people. And I'm just believing some incredible stories and testimonies are going to come out of that. What a great time that was. And last week, Beth helped to open up our spiritual eyes to see the power of God unfolding in our lives. Also, I've got to mention that last week, we baptized 23 people who went public with their faith. Isn't that awesome? I knew the day was coming when we'd have some of those big baptisms, and we got another tank just to make all that happen. And I probably should say 24 people got baptized because I took Mario down as well. And but there's all kinds of expressions of faith. And I want to stay really close to my notes today. When I speak, so much is going on in my spirit, and the Lord's just dropping stuff down into my spirit, and I want to make sure that you don't miss anything today because I believe this is so important, every word of it. So I want to make sure that I get through it and there's no diversion onto what may be good things, but not what is written here. So I want to talk about these expressions of faith and take you in a direction that I believe will lift the burden and the pressure that we can sometimes put ourselves under when it comes to faith. Has anybody ever felt the burden of faith itself? Faith is supposed to lift the burden, but just entering into faith becomes the burden. So stay with me and let this message develop before you evaluate any statement, because at the end I'm going to wrap this message all up in Scripture, and then I'm going to pray for some people. It's common to associate faith with determination, strength, claiming victory, keeping your head up, mountain-moving power. Oh, that stirs our faith when we hear messages like that, doesn't it? And we typically wouldn't say that the following is an expression of faith: weakness, weeping, burdened, defeated, wounded, brokenness, hiding, loneliness, or fear. Actually, a lot of people can't seem to find faith because they can't escape the brokenness long enough to even experience any amount of faith. Or they are so burdened down by the cares of life that faith is nowhere in sight. Or the weeping from painful experiences just doesn't seem to stop long enough, and you can't pick your head up to see that faith is trying to enter into your life, but again, you're so weighted down. Maybe you have been hiding from faith because you fear the failure of trying faith. What if I pray? What if I have faith? What if I speak it? What if it doesn't work? We become burdened down by faith itself. But what if I told you that weakness, brokenness, hiding, weeping, and fear can all be expressions of faith? These emotions are very important ingredients to the working out of our faith. Let me illustrate this. If it's a nice day out, we like the kids to play outside, don't we? And so we say, kids, hey, it's nice out. Don't sit here and watch TV or play games. We want them exerting their energy and tiring them out so they go to bed on time, right? So we're like, go outside and play and enjoy the kids in the neighborhood. Any kids, just go outside, right? And so the kids, they come running back to the door and they open up the door like 20 minutes later and you're like, whoa. It's a long day ahead. So go on outside and play. And then they come back again and you're like, no, go outside. Now you're locking the door. You're not allowed inside. So you make them play outside. But if your child comes to the door crying with a bloody nose and their face up against the patio window with blood running down the door, are you going to tell them, just keep playing? Go outside, enjoy the neighborhood, enjoy the other kids? No, you're not going to do that. Well, most of you are not. You're going to get a washcloth, you're going to get some ice, and you're going to hold them in your arms and nurse them back to health. But then you're going to send them back outside again. And you're going to tell them, go back out there and ride that bike. Now, if the child is riding their bike and they fall again and plant their nose in the pavement and they're back at the door, blood's flowing down from their nose, are you going to let them in just because that's now happened like 3 times? Or are you going to say, no, go on, just keep trying? No, you're going to open the door. You're going to let it. What good parent wouldn't want to, in their child's time of pain and time of need, wouldn't grab them and embrace them into their arms and nurse them back to health? But what if the child grows up and they stop coming to the door because now they're thinking like an adult? I shouldn't have this problem anymore. I shouldn't ever fall off my bike. I know how to ride a bike. And so now they're embarrassed by the mistake. The child grows up, becomes an adult, they leave their childlike faith, and they stop coming to the door. God's not going to run out and chase us down when we fall. But God's going to always open the door when we come to Him with our mistakes and our burdens and our tears and the pain and the experiences that we go through. The enemy in this world and the enemy in our mind would love nothing more than to get us to give up on faith by telling us that our expressions of fear and tears and weakness and brokenness is a sign of failure. That's how adults reason this stuff out. And God's telling us, you need childlike faith, or you might run to all the wrong places. Or you might think, I got to go hide and I got to sort this out and wipe away the tears and get my strength back and get back into that place where people look at me as being the man of faith or the woman of faith that I am. And all the time, God's wanting you to stay like a child when it comes to faith. You see, these kinds of expressions, they're not a sign of failure. They can be, though, a gateway to faith, the patio door, if you will. And God is always going to let you in. Listen to this. Faith is not tied to how much faith you have, but where it leads you. Sometimes faith is expressed by a posture. We can do this. We can make it. And there isn't a thing in the world that says you're going to make it. But we're just pumping our fist and we're feeling like this is going to work out. And sometimes we associate faith by how much of it that we express and how strong we look and the stature. We take the stance of faith. But faith is not tied to how much you have, but where it leads you. So if my fear causes me to run to God, then my fear is an expression of faith. If my weakness leads me to dependency on God, then my weakness is an expression of faith. If my defeat causes me to find shelter in God, then my defeat is an expression of faith. If I allow my burdens to lead me and cause me to draw close to God, then my burdens are an expression of faith. If my tears are a language that God understands, then my tears are an expression and a communication of faith. What I'm trying to say is this: don't let the devil keep you from a faith experience because your expression doesn't look like a victory parade. And sometimes that's what we can teach, is that faith always looks like a victory parade. Come on, keep your head up. Don't let your head down. Come on, stop that crying. Come on, have some faith. Have some faith. Have some faith. And what we do is we teach people, and I'm not saying that isn't faith, but sometimes we are teaching people to do it on their own strength. Wipe that away. Stand up straight. Come on. Don't forget what the Lord has told you. Keep on marching. And sometimes we keep on marching further and further from the place that we need to bury our head in God and just cry, let Him know our fears, let Him know what we're going through, let Him know where we're weak, let Him know where people have done us wrong. God will always, always open the door. I prefer faith that marches in victory, but sometimes it flows in tears. Now, there's a difference between crying in the corner and weeping in the presence of God. Crying in the corner away from God produces doubt and isolation. But weeping in the presence of God can produce strength. It can produce protection and security while you're there in the presence of God. Thinking back to when we were selling our building at 50 Monroe Street. And that's all we needed to do was sell that building, and then we could start building our building. Because that's all we needed was a good down payment, and we were getting what we felt was a good price, but also a generous price for the church that was buying our building. And so we made the transaction, and we worked out a lease to stay there for 1 year while we build our building. And we just started pumping our fist, and we started the faith parade and the victory parade that everything was going to happen. We did it for a month. We did it for 2 months. We did it for 6 months and 10 months and 11 months. Still no loan, still no building, no permits. And then we are down to just 2 weeks to go on our lease, and with the promise to that church, we will not hold you up 1 week. We were having to exit with no place to go. Our church was about to be homeless. And you know what? To be honest with you, 2 weeks, out of a whole year, 2 weeks before we left, you probably remember the message when I came out with no notes, and I sat on a chair, and I said, I just need to have a talk with you around the family table and let you know what's going on. I could not hold the tears back. Was I afraid? You betcha. I was responsible for a lot of people. I was responsible for, trying to get this loan. I was responsible for building the building. I was responsible. Oh my goodness. The weight and the pressure that I had put on myself. I waited so long that here I was 2 weeks before we had to go, and now I'm sitting on the stage having to tell you I can't pump my fist no more. Telling you I'm burdened by what's going to happen. But that wasn't a lack of faith. That was just getting real with my faith. Because that's where I was. And I wept, and I told you, please, just don't see the tears that I'm crying as a lack of faith. It's just real and what I'm feeling. But I'm still trusting God. I don't know what's going to happen. We must have looked at 50 places to take the church. I don't know why places would not open up for us. I mean, we were searching so hard. And then we just said, let's give up and go to God and see what happens. I'll never forget that Monday. I drove into the mall and I sat in my truck, and we had already asked the mall if we could come in, we'll renovate any place. They're like, nope. They just said no. And it was a very quick no. And I was sitting in the parking lot, and I said, God, I feel like a failure. And this hurts. And I don't know what to say next week. I don't have a message in me. But here I am with you, God. What do you want to do. See, the fear and the pain and the difficulty and the situations and experiences that you go through, if they lead you to God, that's an expression of your faith. But if you quit and you go off in a corner and you cry about the same thing that you've been crying about for the rest of your life, isolated from the one that can help you and give you refuge and give you restoration and give you strength and give you faith to go back out and experience what he wants you to experience, if you keep going to the corner, you'll stay in the corner. Don't isolate yourself. Somebody just needs to get real with God today. And I was in that truck, bawling my eyes out. I feel it today. It was such an experience. And I was like, God, what are you going to do? And he was like, there. Finally, I've been listening to you for a whole year. Tell them people what you were going to do. You are not going to find a place. You are not going to build a building. You are not going to get those permits. But if you give it up to me, I'll show you my best stuff. And feeling that caused me to cry all the more. I was leaned right over my steering wheel, bawling my eyes out in the mall parking lot when I got a phone call, and I was trying to wipe my tears away, and you know, if I'm crying and I answer, this doesn't usually happen. It's like you start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hello. And the guy on the other end of the line said, hey, this is the manager of the mall. Hey, I just thought of something. Do you want to come by the mall? I want to show you a space. And he said, when can you be here? I was like, 1 minute. I was already there. I said, well, give me about 5 minutes. I got a couple things I need to take care of. And God, just one thing right after another, in that point of weakness, in that feeling of defeat, God was building my faith. See, that can be faith. You just got to get real with God. My faith didn't change, but my expression did. See, our battles in life will change our expressions, but the real battle, here's the real battle, to change and to channel that expression into faith that leads us into the presence of God, not away from God. Sometimes we give up on faith for what we're believing for when it doesn't work, and that's the point when we really need to get real. Because that's where the real battle is where you take all of that feeling and all of that emotion and you say, lead me into the presence of God. See, Jesus, he cares about what we're going through. He cares about every situation. I think back in the story of Lazarus when he died. Mary, his sister, and some other Jews that loved Lazarus dearly. They were crying, they were weeping, they were heartbroken. And Jesus comes along and he says, hey, get your heads up. Square your shoulders back. What's the matter with you? Have you lost your faith? If you remember that story, I don't know what Bible you read it in because it ain't in there. No, it says Jesus was touched. His spirit was touched by what they were going through, and out of that, we get this simple lesson from Jesus in Matthew 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Jesus, the Son of God, the Almighty One, he wept. Why did Jesus weep? Because he cared. Because he cared. You know, men try to be strong because many times we associate crying with weakness. So we say we need to be strong and we need to suppress our emotions and get into that faith posture. But you know what? Brokenness and crying and yielding to those emotions may just mean that you care. Now, I've been in a lot of situations where I've held the tears back. I've held my emotions back because I felt like I needed to be strong. And maybe that was the very thing that kept me from leading people to where their real strength comes from. So it don't come from me. It don't come from you. If you think that you got to match up to something or be strong enough for something or have people see you as the kind of person that you think you ought to be a faith-filled Christian, you may be blocking them from the pathway that actually leads them to where their strength can really come from. Romans chapter 12 and verse 15 says this, "Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep." When we support each other, you see, Jesus, he's glorified. And he doesn't want us to do life alone. When you are weak, let your weakness lead you to the presence of God. Hebrews 4:15 says this, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." See, weakness does not have to identify with a lack of faith if you let it serve as a reminder that your strength comes from the Lord. This is an expression of faith. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7 says, "Cast your care upon the Lord because he cares for you." You can carry that burden, or you can get close enough to God where you can cast it on him. Psalms 55 and verse 22, "Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip and fall." So out of this, I ask the question, who are the godly? This scripture would say the godly are people with burdens, right? They're people who will take their burdens to the Lord. What burdens? Things that hurt, things that make me angry, things that make me feel wronged and sad and sick, addiction. God will never say, "What are you doing with that stuff?" No. He opens the door and says, "This is where you're supposed to be." They're expressions of faith if they lead us to God. Psalms 91 and verse 4, "He will cover you with his wings." You will be safe in his care. His faithfulness will protect and defend you. I want to have Dave Jackson come up, and you did so good in the first service. I'm going to have him come up and play God again. Dave, I want you to stand right here. And I want you to just stand like this. I feel small next to this guy, and that's okay because I'm next to him. But let me just teach you something here, because God is the one that wants to give us shelter and protect us and assure us that he loves us. But he can only do that when we are sheltered in him. And it's there that we find strength in the Lord, is when we are sheltered in his arms. And then you know what? We start to feel strength come back into our lives. We start to feel a newness of faith and a restoration that takes place in our life. And all of a sudden there's a boldness that comes. And weakness is starting to fade away. Why? Because I've been sheltered under the wings of God, the Almighty, to the point I'm like, all right, let me try this out. And I just go out to the devil with my new strength, and I'm like, you want some of this? And then he brings a big storm against me. And what do? I'll run back and I'm like, you want some of this? Because you know what? I feel protection. So if you want some of this, you're going to have to come through him. And when we shelter ourselves under the Almighty, we get that strength to go back out again. I just want to tell you today, folks, that every time you go out and the enemy pushes you down again, causes you to stumble, causes you to be fearful, causes you to weep, causes you to feel weakness, don't ever get caught in his trap of feeling like you can't go back there, because that's what you're supposed to do. It isn't that, oh, I fail every time, I'm always weak, I can't stand up against this. You don't have to stand up against it. He does. He does. He's the shelter, he's the strength, he's the protector. He's the one that tells us that we are loved and we are everything he's called us to be. Thank you, God. Dave, appreciate that. When you are sheltered underneath his wing, you can taunt the devil. I love that spot. Just make him mad. Because there's nothing he can do to you when you're sheltered. See, that's godliness. That's godliness. That's righteousness. When you're hiding out in the presence of God. Paul writes this as we finish up, and the band is coming. 2 Corinthians 12 and verse 9. The Lord said, my grace is all you need. My power, I love this. My power works best in weakness. Can I say that again? My power works best in weakness. Oh, it doesn't work best when I'm pumping my fist and God is proud of me. Look at me, God. Look at me go. Look at me march. I'm in this victory parade. Everything tells me this isn't going to work out, but I'm suppressing that. I feel like crying, but I'm not going to cry. Look at me, God. I don't need God no tissues with me today. God, I'm so strong. Boy, I'm telling you what, I'm just the best leader of my family. I'm the best husband. Look at me just take on the devil every single day. And you start to think those kinds of things, and God's not impressed with us. Why? Because when we're seemingly pumping the faith that we're always taught or always thinking, the devil gets us to buy into lies. And then God writes a scripture like this for us, that in our weakness, that's when we get his best stuff. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have a victory parade. Because even in our weakness, we can keep claiming and believing the things that God has promised us. It isn't a retreat to doubt. It's a retreat back to what he says, what he does, and how he responds, and how he takes care of me, and how he fights off my enemies, and how he gives me the strength to go on sheltered in the presence of God. Don't let the devil tell you your expressions are a lack of faith, but a sign of faith. I think this is what the Green family has been learning lately. Because I'll admit there's some things that make me scared. I don't want to show it. But I can tell you, God and I just been having some good cries. And you might be going through something. And don't feel like, I got to get myself together. Man, let it out. Let faith out. Let that expression out. Take that fear, take that sorrow, take that pain, take whatever your situation is, and take it to God. Have a good cry with him. Because when you get close to him and he weeps for you That's the only way that he shows you that he cares. He can't show you that he cares when you're hiding somewhere. He's not going to drag you out of the corner. That corner the devil built. And he put you in it. And he put a lock on the door and said, you stay here. But I'm saying somebody needs to come out of the corner today. You may not stop crying, but you can take those tears to the Lord. You may still be afraid, but you take it to the presence of God. You still may be worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or the doctor's report, but you take it to the Lord. But whatever you got to do, get out of the corner and get into the presence of God where you can find shelter in Jesus' name.